child carries a curse. Since she came into this house, nothing has grown. Not the harvest, not my womb.
A 9-year-old girl, a bucket of water, and a grown woman pointing a finger at her, saying, "This child carries a curse." That was the moment Abena's life ended, and the moment something else, something unstoppable, began to grow. In Kumasi, Ghana, a family stood in a compound. The air smelled of roasting corn from the street below. And in the middle of that circle stood 9-year-old Abena, holding a bucket of water she never got to put down. Because in the next 5 seconds, her stepmother, Ajoa, pointed at her and said, "This child carries a curse. Since she came into this house, nothing has grown. Not the harvest, not my womb, not this man's fortune." The bucket slipped. Water spread across Abena's bare feet. She looked from face to face, waiting for someone, anyone, to defend her. Her father stood at the edge of the yard, and he said absolutely nothing. That silence broke something inside her. Not just the accusation, but the fact that the one person who should have protected her chose peace over his own daughter. From that day on, she was no longer Abena. She was simply called Trouble, or worse, that one. For 7 years, Abena learned to disappear inside a house that had decided she took up too much space. She ate whatever was left after Ajoa's sons ate first. Some nights, almost nothing at all. She slept on a mat in the storeroom. Visiting aunties eyed her sideways, as though even her shadow might carry something contagious. And yet, she never stopped going to school. Hunger made numbers swim on the page. But inside that classroom, for a few precious hours, nobody called her cursed. At night, she would whisper to a mother she barely remembered, "Mama, if you can hear me, tell me they're wrong about me." No answer ever came. But asking the question somehow made the next morning easier to face. When Abena turned 16, Ajoa gave her father an ultimatum. Choose her or this marriage. 3 days later, her father stood in the doorway and told his own daughter she needed to find somewhere else to sleep. She walked out of that compound with one woven bag, 2 dresses, a school notebook, and a cracked photograph of her mother. She made it 5 streets before the tears came. She sat down at the edge of a drainage ditch and let it all come. Years of it, all at once. And then, from somewhere deep inside her, a voice rose up. "Stop asking why this happened to you. Start asking what you can build out of it." Abena slept curled against the wall of a printing shop. A woman selling plantain took her in and said, "Nothing in this world is free. But not everything has to cost you your pride." She became a hawker, selling sachet water at traffic lights, weaving between cars near the Adam roundabout. She learned the city's rhythm fast, which junction had the longest red light, which drivers had exact change ready. By 17, she was selling roasted groundnuts. She shared a cramped room with 3 other girls. It wasn't a home. But after sleeping on streets, 4 walls felt like a miracle. Then at 19, she found a bakery. A sign said, "Hands wanted. Room at the back for the right person." She showed up at 4:30 a.m. And she kept showing up every single morning for 5 years. She fell in love with the work. Flour, water, yeast, transforming into something alive. She asked questions the older bakers found strange. But within a year, they'd stopped finding it strange. They started asking her opinion instead. At 24, she left the bakery. She had been saving every seed eye for 5 years. She rented a narrow table at the edge of a busier market stall, just enough room for a cooler box and a small gas ring. She labeled her packaging by hand. Abena's, no slogan, no decoration. Other people had spent her entire life trying to name her. Cursed, Trouble, that one. Now, finally, she would name herself. She sold out before noon on her very first day. By the end of that first week, people came specifically for her table. But none of it came easy. Her rent got raised without warning. A supplier sold her spoiled flour. There were nights she sat with a notebook, watching the gap between spending and earning refuse to close. What if they were right about me all along? But that small voice always returned. Stop asking why. Start asking what you can build from this. She slowly understood something. Hardship wasn't punishment. It was training. Every ruined batch taught her something. Every difficult customer sharpened her instincts. One Wednesday afternoon, a woman in a sharply tailored jacket stopped at Abena's table, entirely out of place among the dust and noise. She bought one meat pie, unwrapped it, ate it standing right there. Then she went very still. "How many of these can you make in a single day?" Her name was Madame Oze, head of purchasing for a fast-growing chain of supermarkets. She sat down at that dusty little table, and for nearly an hour, they talked. Volume, consistency, packaging, delivery schedules. Abena answered every question calmly, even as her palms stayed damp. Before leaving, Madame Oze pressed a card into her hand. "Get certified. Get proper packaging. Come find me in 3 months," she paused. "And for what it's worth, that is the best meat pie I have eaten in this city in 20 years. Abena worked harder than ever. She got certified. She found a small kitchen space. She hired 2 women from her old neighborhood. Women who had also been told they would never amount to anything. Within 3 years, Abena's products were on the shelves of 50 supermarkets. Her signature meat pie had a cult following. She expanded into breads, pastries, and a line of traditional snacks that reminded people of their grandmother's kitchens. She went from selling sachet water at traffic lights to owning her own distribution network. From sleeping against shuttered walls to owning a home with walls that were hers. Not borrowed, not rented, not conditional. One Sunday morning, Abena received an invitation. Her cousin was getting married, back in the very compound where she had been cursed. The family didn't expect her to come. They probably didn't even expect her to be alive. But she came. When she walked through that gate, the compound went completely silent. She was wearing a designer dress worth more than their houses. 2 security guards waited outside. A driver stood by the car. Her stepmother, Ajoa, now old and gray, saw her and froze. The same woman who had once pointed at a 9-year-old and called her cursed now looked at the ground in shame. Her father, the man who had told her to leave, sat in the corner, tears streaming down his face. He could barely look at her. When he finally opened his mouth, his voice cracked. "Abena, my daughter, please forgive me." The aunties, the cousins, the neighbors who had turned away from her all those years ago. They lined up to greet her. They called her Madame Abena. They asked if she had room in her company for their children. Ajoa approached her slowly, trembling, holding out her hand. "Please, I was foolish. I didn't know who you would become." Abena looked at her calmly, and then she said the words that would echo through that compound for years. "You didn't know who I would become because you never saw who I truly was. You only saw what I didn't have. You called me cursed. But look at you now, and look at me." Every story has a lesson. Abena's story teaches us that people's labels don't define you. Her family called her trouble, but she was never trouble. She was potential waiting for the right conditions to bloom. Hardship is often training in disguise. Every setback, every ruined batch, every lost sale taught her something she would need later. Success is the best revenge, but forgiveness is the greatest strength. She could have humiliated them. Instead, she showed them who she had become. Your current situation is not your final destination. Abena was homeless at 16. By her late 20s, she was a CEO. And the most important lesson of all, a tree that grows out of concrete is stronger than any tree planted in a garden, because it had to fight for every single inch. If Abena's story touched you, please subscribe to Afrok-Drama Diaries. We tell African stories that make you feel, think, and learn. Comment below. Have you ever been judged unfairly? How did you respond? Share this video with someone who needs to hear Abena's story. And remember, every story has a lesson. See you in the next one.